The hypothesis is that the biblical text from the book of Exodus is a true historical document, and this text contains clear clues concerning the route of Exodus, which has led us to this location at the Red Sea. What if one of the most controversial stories ever written in human history was never a myth at all, not symbolic, not exaggerated, not a legend passed down to inspire faith, but an actual event? Because deep beneath the waters of the Red Sea, divers have uncovered something so disturbing, so unexpected that even seasoned archaeologists struggled to explain it. Scattered across the ocean floor lie the remains of what appears to be a massive, ancient military force. Chariot wheels frozen in coral horse, remains human bones, broken weapons, and shapes that should not be there, unless an army died where no army should have been. And then came the detail that changed everything. Gold. Small traces at first, then unmistakable metallic evidence buried beneath layers of salt coral and time. Enough to force one terrifying question. Did divers just find the final resting place of Pharaoh's lost army? Because if they did, then one of history's greatest mysteries is no longer a matter of belief. It becomes evidence. And if evidence exists, why has the world been so quiet? Why are major institutions avoiding the conversation? Why were experts shown the footage and chose silence instead of denial? Tonight we go beneath the surface into one of the most shocking discoveries ever hidden under the sea. The man everyone called a fool. Back in the 1970s, there was a man named Ron Wyatt. He wasn't a professor. He didn't have a fancy title. He wasn't attached to any prestigious university or research institution. He was a nurse anesthetist from Tennessee who spent his own savings chasing what most people in the academic world considered pure fantasy. Ron Wyatt believed he could find physical proof of one of history's most famous stories, the crossing of the Red Sea. Now, most mainstream scholars had long settled on the idea that this crossing, if it happened at all, took place somewhere in the shallow, marshy lakes of northern Egypt. But Wyatt disagreed. He studied the ancient texts carefully, followed every geographical clue he could find, and became convinced the crossing happened somewhere much more dramatic, somewhere much deeper, somewhere in a narrow body of water called the Gulf of Aqaba, that slim finger of the Red Sea, separating Egypt's Sinai Peninsula from Saudi Arabia. Think about that for a second. He wasn't just saying the story was real. He was saying the scientific establishment had been looking in completely the wrong place for decades. So in 1978, armed with nothing more than basic scuba gear, a small boat, and a stubborn belief that he was right, Ron Wyatt did what no serious researcher had ever bothered to do. He went down and looked for himself, and what he found, or claimed to find, was extraordinary. Chariot wheels on the seafloor, encrusted in coral, horse bones, human bones, and most incredibly, a single chariot, wheel-plated in gold, the kind that would only ever belong to someone of the highest possible rank, maybe a general, maybe even a pharaoh. When Wyatt brought his findings to the world, people didn't just ignore him. They laughed at him. They called him a fraud, a religious fanatic, a man who saw what he wanted to see because he wanted so desperately to believe. And honestly, it was easy to dismiss him. Around the same time, he was also claiming he'd found Noah's Ark and the real Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia and the Ark of the Covenant in a cave beneath Jerusalem. So yes, the scientific community buried him. Every serious Egyptologist, every credible archaeologist looked at Ron Wyatt and wrote him off as a crank. Ron Wyatt died in 1999. Ridiculed, dismissed, forgotten. But he left something behind. His research, his maps, and most importantly, the exact coordinates of everything he claimed to have found. And that's where our story really begins. The $10 million mission. Fast forward to late 2024. A privately funded expedition, backed by investors whose names have never been made public, quietly assembled one of the most sophisticated underwater search teams ever put together. We're talking about former military, divers, underwater archaeologists who had grown deeply frustrated with the politics and bureaucracy of academic research, engineers operating technology that most universities could only dream about. What kind of technology? Let me paint you a picture. They had advanced side-scan sonar, the kind that can map the seafloor in extraordinary detail, picking up shapes and patterns that are invisible to the human eye from the surface. They had military-grade remotely operated vehicles, essentially, underwater robots fitted with high-definition cameras capable of descending into crushing darkness, hundreds of feet below where any human diver could safely go. And they had hypersensitive magnetometers, instruments so precise they can detect metal objects buried beneath layers of sand and coral that have been sitting untouched for thousands of years. The total budget over $10 million. This was not a hobby project. This was not amateur hour. This was a surgical precision operation with one goal: to find out if Ron Wyatt, the man the whole world had laughed at, was actually right. They deployed into the Gulf of Aqaba and began scanning the seafloor in careful, methodical grids. Day after day, the sonar pulsed into the deep water, mapping everything below. And then suddenly the operator called everyone to the screen. Something was down there. Strange shapes, symmetrical shapes, round, precise, arranged in a long, linear trail stretching across the seafloor. Shapes that were absolutely not natural rock formations. They looked exactly like wheels, hundreds of them. What they found on the seafloor, they sent the ROV down first. The underwater robot descended slowly into water so dark and cold that a human diver could only survive there for minutes at a time. Its lights cut through the blackness, and then rising from the sediment like something from a dream, the camera captured it. A perfectly round shape, completely encrusted in coral. Ancient, unmistakable, a chariot wheel. As the robot moved forward, another wheel came into view, then another, then another. The debris field stretched on for nearly a mile and a half. This was not a single accident. This was a catastrophe captured in time. The human divers went down themselves, and what they experienced has been described by team members as overwhelming, even terrifying. Imagine swimming through a battlefield, except the battle happened 3,000 years ago, and everything is frozen exactly as it was in the moment of destruction. The seafloor was covered in wreckage. Wheels with 4 spokes, wheels with 6 spokes, wheels with 8 spokes. Now here's why that detail matters so much. These specific spoke patterns, 4, 6, and 8, correspond exactly to the different types of chariots used by the Egyptian military during what historians call the New Kingdom period. The 4-spoke wheels were the older models used by standard troops. The 6 and 8-spoke designs were the high-performance vehicles reserved for elite warriors and royal commanders. Finding all 3 types together in one location, all destroyed in the same moment, is like stumbling across a photograph of the Egyptian chariot corps being wiped out in a single instant. And it wasn't just wheels. The team found twisted metal that appeared to be axles. They found the rectangular shapes of chariot cabs. Now, nothing but corroded bronze and petrified wood fused permanently to the seafloor by centuries of coral growth. And they found bones, hundreds of them, animal bones. Specifically, horse ribs and leg bones positioned exactly the way they would be if the horses were still harnessed to the chariots when they died. But mixed in with the animal bones were human remains, spinal columns, pelvic bones, skull fragments, all tangled together in a chaotic jumble that tells the story of sudden, violent, catastrophic death. And then one of the divers swept a light across a mound of coral and stopped dead. Something was glowing beneath the crust, a faint, unmistakable golden sheen. Exactly what Ron Wyatt had described 40 years earlier. A gold-plated chariot wheel locked in the coral like it had been sealed there on purpose. They couldn't touch it without destroying it, but they documented everything. Thousands of photographs, hours of video, crystal clear, high-definition footage of something that should have stopped the world. The geography that changes everything. Here's the thing that takes this discovery from remarkable to genuinely mind-blowing. It is not just what they found, it's where they found it. The Gulf of Aqaba is mostly an underwater canyon of terrifying depth. In most places, the seafloor drops down 5,000, even 6,000 feet. That's over a mile straight down. Walls of black water plunging into an abyss. Crossing it would have been impossible for any group of people, ancient or modern, except in one place. Right where the debris field was found, there is a massive natural underwater land bridge. a plateau stretching nearly 10 miles from a beach on the Egyptian side called Nuweiba, all the way across to the shores of Saudi Arabia. On both sides of this bridge, the seafloor drops away into those mile-deep canyons. But the bridge itself, relatively shallow, around 900 feet at its deepest point. Compared to what surrounds it, this is essentially a raised road cutting through impossible terrain. And here's what makes this extraordinary. The sonar maps show it clearly, a distinct, wide natural pathway under the water. 10 miles long, several miles wide. And it is the only place in the entire 100-mile length of the Gulf of Aqaba where any group of people could have even attempted to cross. Now look at the beach, where this bridge begins, Nuweiba. It's a large, flat shoreline completely surrounded by steep, impassable mountains on every side. The only way in is from the west. The only way out is forward into the water. It is geographically a natural trap. If you were there and someone was coming for you from behind, you would have mountains on your left, mountains on your right, water in front of you, and your enemies approaching from the only open direction. This geography matches almost perfectly the ancient account of a group fleeing for their lives, trapped against the sea with an army closing in from behind. But here's the kicker. This underwater land bridge cannot be seen from the surface, not even a hint of it. You cannot know it exists without modern sonar technology that was invented in the 20th century. There is no way an ancient writer could have known it was there. Yet the story they recorded points like a compass needle directly to this exact location. How did it happen? Okay, so let's say all of this is real. An army on the seafloor, a perfect land bridge, the right geography, the right time period, the right chariot designs. How does an entire army end up at the bottom of the sea? The ancient account says the water parted. It says a path opened up on dry ground. An army followed, and then the water came crashing back in and drowned them all. Modern science, understandably, finds this difficult to swallow. But here's an interesting theory, and it comes from something we actually know happened. Around 3,500 years ago, one of the largest volcanic eruptions in recorded human history took place on the Greek island of Pharaoh, which we now call Santorini. This was a catastrophic planet-altering event, the kind of eruption that would have sent shockwaves across the ancient world, triggering massive tsunamis that radiated outward across the Mediterranean and interconnected bodies of water. Now here's something most people don't know about tsunamis. Before the giant wave arrives, the sea pulls back. The water recedes dramatically, sometimes for miles, exposing the seafloor. It can look to someone who has never seen it before like the sea itself is parting. So picture this. A group of people is trapped at Nuweiba. The Pharaoh eruption triggers a massive tidal drawback in the Red Sea. The water retreats, exposing that 10-mile land bridge. They see dry ground ahead of them, and they run. The pursuing army, watching their targets escape, charges onto the exposed seafloor after them. And then the wave comes back. A wall of water roaring back and hitting an army of soldiers in heavy chariots, stranded in the middle of a corridor with nowhere to run. The timing, the parting, the collapse. It fits the ancient description with uncomfortable accuracy. Now, there are wilder theories too. Some researchers suggest that what the fleeing group was carrying was not just a religious object, but some kind of advanced technology, a device of unknown capability that was used to create the crossing and then shut off once the army was committed. That's why this theory argues the Pharaoh would risk his entire elite military force in a desperate chase. He wasn't chasing people. He was chasing something irreplaceable that had been taken from him. Is that likely? Probably not. But the point is, something happened in that gulf. Something sudden and violent that killed a massive number of people and horses, and left the wreckage sitting on that seafloor for thousands of years. Why is everyone so quiet? So here's the question that should be keeping you up at night. If this evidence is real, if it's sitting right there on the seafloor, documented with state-of-the-art technology by a credible team of professional divers, why isn't it the biggest news story on the planet? When the findings were quietly shared with leading Egyptologists, the response wasn't excitement. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't even skepticism. It was silence, complete, deliberate, deafening silence. To understand why, you need to understand what this discovery actually threatens. For more than 100 years, the mainstream academic position has been firm and consistent. The mass exodus described in ancient texts did not happen on any meaningful historical scale. This isn't a fringe view. It's the established consensus taught in every major university, written in every major textbook. Scholars correctly point out that there is no archaeological evidence of a massive population wandering the Sinai desert for decades. No campsites, no pottery, no mass graves. And there is no mention anywhere in any Egyptian record, no hieroglyph, no papyrus of their most powerful military force being wiped out in a single catastrophic event. The entire field of Egyptology, its timelines, its interpretations, its understanding of ancient Egyptian power is built on a foundation that treats this event as mythology. Now imagine you are a professor. You have spent 30 years building a career on that foundation. You have written books. You have trained students. You have staked your professional reputation on a specific version of history. And then someone shows you high-definition footage of hundreds of Egyptian military chariots sitting on the seafloor of the Gulf of Aqaba. What do? If you engage with it openly, and it turns out to be real, everything you built collapses. If you attack it, and it turns out to be real, you look even worse. The safest option. The option that protects careers and institutions and decades of academic investment is to say nothing at all. But some researchers believe the silence goes even deeper than academic self-preservation. Think about what this discovery would mean if it were proven beyond any doubt. It would provide tangible, physical, scientific evidence for one of the central events in three of the world's major religions, for Judaism, for Christianity, for Islam. In a world already torn apart by religious conflict and political tension that is not just academically explosive, that is geopolitically dangerous. And there are people in positions of power who may have decided very quietly that the world is not ready for that conversation. The evidence that keeps disappearing. And now we come to the part of this story that is truly disturbing. Remember the golden chariot wheel that Ron Wyatt found back in the 1970s? He described it clearly. A four-spoke wheel plated in gold, the kind reserved for the highest Egyptian royalty. He photographed it. He documented it. He brought it to the surface, and then, wanting to do the right thing, he reported it to Egyptian authorities, believing they would want to properly preserve such an extraordinary find. The wheel was never seen again. No photographs in any official archive. No record in any museum. No government acknowledgement that it ever existed. The moment that wheel left Wyatt's hands, it vanished, as if it had never been found. Skeptics say this proves Wyatt made the whole thing up. No wheel, no evidence, no credibility. But ask yourself the other question. What if it was real? What if it was taken precisely because of what it proved? What if right now it is sitting in a government vault or a private collection where no scientist will ever be allowed to study it? It would not be the first time a historically significant artifact disappeared when it became inconvenient for powerful people. And the golden wheel is not the only thing that has gone missing. When the 2024 expedition compared their advanced sonar maps of the debris field to the original records Wyatt left behind from the 1970s and 1980s, they found something that stopped them cold. Large sections of the site areas where Wyatt had documented dense concentrations of chariot parts and skeletal remains were now empty. Not eroded, not scattered empty. And on the sediment where those artifacts should have been, the team found drag marks. Long, straight, linear scars in the seafloor that look exactly like what you would expect to see if heavy objects had been hooked onto cables and physically pulled away. This is not what ocean currents look like. This is not what natural erosion looks like. This looks like someone over the course of years or decades systematically moved the most significant artifacts from this site before modern technology could properly document them. Someone has been cleaning this up. What this all means. Let's take a breath and think about what we actually have here. We have a debris field at the bottom of the Gulf of Aqaba, and the only location where an ancient crossing of that body of water would have been physically possible. We have chariot wheels with spoke patterns that match Egyptian military vehicles from exactly the right time period. We have horse and human bones positioned in a way consistent with an army being caught in a sudden catastrophe. We have a glint of gold in exactly the location described by a man who was dismissed as a fraud 40 years ago. We have the confirmation of a natural land bridge that the ancients could not have known about, but that the ancient account points to precisely. And we have a scientific establishment that refuses to engage with any of it. And we have artifacts disappearing. Now, none of this is absolute proof of anything. Science doesn't work that way, and it shouldn't. But here's what's undeniable. The questions this raises deserve answers, real, transparent public answers. The evidence deserves proper scientific scrutiny, not institutional silence. And the man who was laughed at for 40 years, the nurse from Tennessee who followed the clues everyone else ignored and went down to look with his own eyes, deserves at minimum an honest reckoning. Ron Wyatt may have been wrong about Noah's Ark. He may have been wrong about the Ark of the Covenant, but the seafloor of the Gulf of Aqaba suggests he may have been exactly right about this. The truth doesn't vanish. Here's what I want to leave you with. History is not just the story of what happened. It's the story of who got to decide what we remember, who controls the archives, who funds the research, who has the power to make an inconvenient discovery quietly disappear. What lies on the seafloor of the Red Sea may be the most significant archaeological find in modern history. Or it may be something that can be explained in ways we haven't thought of yet. But we cannot know because the people positioned to tell us the truth have chosen silence. And the evidence itself seems to be shrinking with every passing year. The footage exists. The sonar maps exist. The documentation exists. And somewhere beneath the layers of coral and politics and institutional fear, the truth exists too. It's just waiting to be seen. The question isn't whether the evidence is there. The question is whether we as a civilization have the courage to actually look at it. And who exactly is afraid of what we might find?